Okay, so I did agricultural runoff and its effects on water quality. Kind of my favorite thing that I do all my stuff on. So I'm going to start with why does this matter? Agricultural pollution has been something that's been happening since kind of the beginning of agriculture and farming, which started at the beginning of human civilization because, they had to eat. And then so as people have become more educated about like the effects of it, the levels have dropped. So the levels of agricultural pollution were actually higher than what they are now because they didn't have any idea of what was happening. Your severity is going to depend on your area as well, and it kind of goes back to your education levels. And then also economics, like if you can afford to fix the problem, and then your weather, so how much rain you normally get in a season. If nothing is done, I do think that this has the potential to crash ecosystems because it is something that it kind of affects land and water at the same time. So this is the leading source of non-point pollution in rivers and lakes. And this is something that typically can't be seen until it's too late. So you can't see the pesticides running into the water until eutrophication begins to happen. So then you have your excessive fertilizers and manures cause an increase in nitrogen and phosphorus, which will eventually lead to eutrophication and is going to cause changes in your water quality and chemistry. And then with your health-related problems, most pesticides and fertilizers are water soluble, so they can be carried to enter bodies of water as well as food products. So this has been known to cause birth defects as well as reproductive disorders. So kind of why I chose this topic, you guys know that soil and agriculture is kind of my niche that I'm into. So I do plan to pursue a career in doing this after I graduate. I came into this program kind of knowing that that's what I thought I wanted to do. And then so because of my background with agriculture, I've already kind of been exposed to this topic. So we've had help from like soil conservationists and people like that to install our manure pit. And then we've also just recently had the barn upgraded to just kind of make us more environmentally friendly. And then in the future, I want to be able to help farmers with their struggle and keeping the environment healthy because, we are kind of a criticized group of people. So I feel like we should be able to give them the help that they need. So just to get started, I know you guys already know, but point source, it comes from a single identifiable source like a smokestack or a pipe. It can be traced. And then your non-point source is coming from multiple places at one time. So it can't necessarily be traced as easily. I know this is kind of like a bad picture, but it's the only one I could find. So just to kind of show your point sources, you have your factory and your wastewater plant that you can see they have discharge going directly out of one single identifiable pipe. And then for your non-point, you have your city streets, your suburbs, your rural homes, feedlots, croplands, and this is much harder to trace because it's all flowing at one time. So if you get a rain event that covers this whole area, all of your different pollutants are going to be flowing from these places at the same time. So your three major causes of agricultural waste can kind of be narrowed down to pesticides and fertilizers, your livestock, and then soil erosion and sedimentation. And then your major causes, so most issues with agricultural waste are caused by rain events or too heavy of irrigation. So the excessive water is going to pick up your loose particles as it is flowing, and since water flows downhill, it's going to carry it with it wherever it's meant to be, wherever it's going. So with your heavy rainfall and your over irrigation, you're just kind of setting yourself up for the stuff to being carried away. And then with your excessive tillage, when the soil's loose, it's going to be more prone to being washed away. So then you're also going to end up with ruts and gullies in your field, which are going to have to be filled in eventually anyway. And then with animal waste and pesticides, whenever they're applied to the field, anything excessive that can't be absorbed into the ground is going to be carried away before it has time to kind of soak in and do what it's supposed to do. So how does this affect water quality? Too much sedimentation in the water can cause cloudiness, and which will reduce the amount of light that can reach down to your aquatic plants, and then it can also clog fish gills and smother their larvae. So eventually, this has the potential to choke out all of your aquatic life. Then your excess nutrients, which we all know is going to cause algal blooms, which can give the water an odor, as well as deplete the oxygen necessary for your aquatic life to survive. So once again, you're kind of choking them out. And then runoff from poorly managed facilities can carry pathogens such as bacteria and viruses that can contaminate bodies of water. So that's where you get your things like E. coli and stuff like that, that can contaminate like wells and stuff like that. So what can be done to help? What they're called best management practices. So what is a BMP, or best management practice? It's a practice or a combination of practices that have been deemed as effective in preventing and reducing the amount of non-point pollution that is released into waterways. So going back to your three major causes, we'll start with pesticides and fertilizers. So when the nutrients exceed your plant needs or are applied right before a rain event, they're going to be washed into water sources. So if you apply right before it rains, of course, everything's just going to be washed away. And then also if you put too much, what can't be absorbed is then going to be washed away as well. So, and then you end up with once this is washed away, you're going to end up with your excessive nutrients in the water that then causes your algal blooms, eutrophication, and then eventually fish kill because the lack of oxygen. And then also you have your all chemicals have the potential to leach into drinking water as well as food products, which can then cause your sicknesses and your birth defects and stuff like that. So what can we do to try and limit the pesticide and fertilizer that's ending up in our waterways? So the first would be integrated pest management. So this is when you use physical methods like traps or even just mowing and harvesting at the right time to kind of kill off your pests or, get rid of them. And then you can also, as more research and technology comes out, they're using genetically modified crops that are pest resistant. So then you don't even have to use your Roundups and chemicals and stuff like that. Next, you just want to follow your labels and instructions that come with the pesticides is a big thing. It tells you mixing instructions, your environmental hazards. So like if it's known to kill off bee colonies and stuff like that, it's going to tell you right on the label. And then also storage and disposal methods. So on a lot of the chemicals, like they don't want them to reach below a freezing point. So you need to keep them in kind of like a climate controlled area to make sure that they're working the way that they should. And then just knowing the characteristics of your land. So if you're really close, if you have a field that's really close to the water, if you can prevent maybe using your pesticides and such on that field, that would, just be a good start. and then as well as how like much of a slope the fields have. So if it's a very steep slope, maybe pesticides aren't the best choice, because then as soon as it rains, everything's just going to be washed down to the bottom. And then soil depth. So if you have really shallow soil or really rocky soil, you know, your pesticides aren't going to be able to absorb into the ground the way that they should. And then last, we have crop rotation. So, you know, the common one is you just rotate between corn and soybeans, because corn pulls the nitrogen out of the ground and soybeans puts it back. So you're then avoiding having to put your fertilizers and chemicals on the ground to kind of replenish that. So next, we're going to get into the improper animal waste. So the runoff from poorly managed facilities can contain pathogens that then can contaminate bodies of water and also leach into groundwater. So then your E. coli, salmonella, all that stuff that these animals are carrying in their gut is then going to end up in your water. Livestock that are given direct access to water are, of course, going to contaminate it because they're using the bathroom right in the water. So I know, at least in the state of Maryland, that's illegal. Your fences have to be at least 10 feet away from the water to prevent that. And then just over applicating your manure in the spring, if it's puddled or you're just using way too much, it's going to overload the ground, and the ground's only going to absorb what it needs, and then the rest is just going to kind of be left over and free to be washed away. So some BMPs, just apply your manure uniformly across the maximum number of acres, so you're not going to end up with nutrient overload, and then you're not going to end up with your puddles in excess that's going to be able to be carried away. And then also just keeping your livestock out of the water, because then they won't be able to directly go in the water, like use the bathroom. And then also your stream banks won't be destroyed pretty much. So you won't end up with your sedimentation and stuff like that. And then just divert your rainwater and runoff away from your barnyards and feedlots. This is where the majority of your manure is going to be. Wherever the cows eat is where they're going to poop. So just diverting your downspouting and other runoffs away from the barnyards, just to keep it from carrying away the waste. So last, we have soil erosion and sedimentation. So your rainwater carries soil particles and releases them into nearby streams or rivers. Anthropogenic activities has actually really accelerated this process, because with your urbanization and construction, you're having more non-porous surfaces. So then just the amount of water that is running off of this can't be absorbed. It's just too much. And then if your fields are left empty after harvest, of course, they're going to be more vulnerable because they don't have any plant systems and roots that are kind of holding everything in place. Then excessive tillage, you're purposely loosening the soil, so you're really just setting yourself up, if it rains, for everything to be carried away. So then what can we do? You have contour farming. So your crops are planted perpendicular to the slopes to try and slow the flow of water and prevent erosion. So you use usually 2 different types of crops, so the different root systems each have their chance to slow everything down. No-till, of course, you just plant right on top of the debris from the previous crop without digging everything up. And then cover cropping, the plants are grown more for benefit of the soil between main crops rather than the yield that they produce. So, and then they also just hold the soil in place. They keep your weeds to a minimum, and then they also absorb excess nutrients. So that's like your oats and your clover and stuff like that. And then finally, you have your riparian buffers. So this is vegetation in the riparian zone. So your riparian zone is the area between land and water, pretty much. So kind of like your stream banks and the area surrounding it. So this acts as a buffer from pollutants entering the stream, as well as slows the water down running off the fields and then holds your stream banks in place. And that's my sources.